Hi everybody, welcome back to another Stoneforge gaming video. Today we are going to be looking at finishing this tree box that I had started quite some time ago for a Beasts of War competition that for one reason or another I got sidetracked. Well, not really sidetracked, I started a new job and so some time went by before I was able to get back to this project. So you can see here that I've painted up the tree bark here. I've done that by dry brushing several layers of different browns and even some grays actually in there, and then doing some washes to make the colors kind of meld together a little bit better. For this part of the video, we're actually going to be looking at how I am going to put the sort of the leaves and stuff like that onto the tree. We've got the clump foliage, and then that's actually just flock there, some mixes that I've mixed together, and I'm actually going to be using hot glue to adhere the clump foliage to the tree, and just kind of placing that on there in some different spots to try to get as good of a join as I can between the clump foliage and the tree itself. And this way what we're going to be able to do is actually allow the hot glue to actually seep into the fibers of the foliage. And then once that glue actually dries inside of there, it would actually create a very strong bond. For this, we're actually going to be highlighting the tops of the different clumps of leaves and things like that. What we're going to do is we're actually going to apply a watered down amount of regular PVA glue, and then we're actually going to be just kind of placing that on there with a brush on the very tops, just so we can kind of get some variation in the way that the trees look there. Again, we're just applying this with a paintbrush, and you don't necessarily need to even be overly specific with it. It doesn't have to be, and you just don't want to really do this on the underside unless you wanted to do some well, it'd be underlights, I guess. It wouldn't really be underlights, it'd be more shadows. But if you wanted to do some shadows, you could do that on the underside if you wanted to use some different colored sort of flocking or whatever. It's actually a pretty good idea. But with this, we're just going to be applying this back and forth. You can see here that some of the glue had not fully dried in this center portion, but that's fine. You can kind of work with it. And again, we're going to be sealing this all afterwards, so that it will all be a much stronger piece when it's all said and done. Honestly, you can probably drop this thing, other than the plaster, and even that with the glue added to it, you're probably going to be able to drop this off your table and not even have to worry about it. So it'll be very, very strong when it's all said and done. And that's really what I wanted to do, because I've seen a lot of people's trees that are, they look very nice, but a lot of them are very sort of flimsy. They kind of fall apart at the first provocation, really. And then, so you can see here, we're just going to kind of sprinkle on this this flock, and again, don't worry about being too exact as far as that goes, because you're going to want to let this dry. We're not even going to move this. I'm actually going to let this dry and sit overnight. And as this, we're gonna knock off the excess, and then I'm gonna let this dry overnight. And you can see there on the tops, it just creates that little bit of a yellowish tinge that the camera, it shows all right, but you can see a little bit of it. But we will be trimming those little excess fiddly bits on the outside. But you can see here we are actually going to be adding a little bit to the base here, where you've got the inside of the tree box and whatnot. We've already, this is after it's all been dried. Some time has gone by, and so it's all pretty solid, but it's going to be even more solid after the step after this one. For now, we're actually just going to be adding some of this flock to the inside of our tree box, just to once again add in some more visual interest to the piece. The inside, you're going to want like sort of grass kind of growing up and out around, and we're also going to be adding in some little bits of clump foliage as well, for like little bushes, things like that. But we're going to leave some of the spots showing so where you can kind of see the dirt, and you'll be able to kind of look and see different spots, like there's grass growing in some spots, and then perhaps where there's more shadow and less light, there won't be as much grass, so you can see the dirt a little bit better. And again, we're kind of watering down this glue, this PVA glue, so that it's not overly thick, because we don't want it to be, I mean, you could make it thicker, but it will be a little bit harder to spread at that point, and we want it to kind of spread throughout the majority of these spots. We're just kind of dabbing that paintbrush in there, making sure that all of the spots we want to are getting done. You can see I'm kind of letting that go up a little bit up the base of the tree as well, because it looks nice for vines, things like that. You could actually add some vines, which would be a nice addition to it. I am not necessarily doing that with this particular piece, but it's actually not a bad idea for the future. If you wanted to make something look very, very overgrown, I kind of wanted this to look moderately overgrown, like somebody hasn't really done much in the last maybe few weeks. But if you wanted to make something that looked really, really overgrown, you could add in vines, you could add in larger bushes. There's actually quite a bit that you could do to make that kind of stand out a little bit more. And again, the same thing that we did with the tops of these trees, we're just kind of sprinkling that in there. You can see it's kind of like almost if you were like adding like a pinch of salt or something like that. You're just going to kind of want to let that go between your fingers, so that you are not putting a ton on there. You're putting enough to where it gets a solid coating, but you're not just pouring the whole. You can see I'm not dumping the whole thing in there. Not to say that that's a bad technique, but I generally like to keep a little bit of control over these pieces. And again, we're going to dump out the excess, and we will let this dry overnight. And then once that's done, you can see I'm just patting out that extra. You can see it's already beginning to add a little bit of nice green to that interior of the tree box. And then once that's done, what we will do is actually go on to sealing all of this in, and we're going to do that by adding a little bit of PVA. You can see where the PVA is still it's still drying, obviously, since we just did it, but in the long run this will look rather nice to have just all together as a solid sort of set piece. Now we're going to be adding in again, like I said, the clump foliage pieces to kind of look like little bushes, and we're just kind of placing those in there. Again, what I like to do a lot of times with my clump foliage, if I'm doing bushes, is I'll actually kind of make them beforehand, and I'll kind of clump them together and add a little bit of PVA so that they're a little harder, and they have a little more rigidity to them. But here you can see I've got a little spray bottle, and I've got a little bit of PVA mixed in there, and what this is going to do is this is going to harden up all of those pieces. We just put a little bit of water and PVA glue in this mix. Now I generally like to clean these out every couple of weeks, because otherwise I mean, it'll clog up your thing, and you'll have to throw them away and use multiples of these. And because I'm not rich, I like to keep up on that sort of stuff. But we're just going to add some extra, slosh it around in there, and then once that's done, we can just literally just spray the thing down. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow all that stuff to harden up in a way that it won't be super hard, so it won't be like glass or something that will shatter, but it'll actually just give it enough toughness to where it won't, you can see there, it just kind of comes out that nozzle, and I'm just spraying it on the surface there to kind of show you what the spray actually will end up looking like when you're putting it on the tree. And I want to do this all over. I'm going to do it all over the surfaces here, and again, it's going to run. It will run, but that's fine. Just let that kind of run. I have a surface here that is very easily cleanable, so I can wipe that down. So I'm not too worried about it. If you're worried about that, you can throw on a mat or something like that. That may help you. But for me, I just kind of spritz it here and there, and you're going to make the whole thing look white, because when it's all said and done, it will kind of seep into all those things, and it will drain out, which does help. Here we are just snipping off of these little pieces here. You can see the little fine hairs. That's just due to the clump foliage, and you're just going to want to make sure that you clean up those edges. Otherwise it'll look like you have a furry tree, which for certain species I'm sure wouldn't be that bad. But again, like that little hanging piece there, again, with it being sort of a maintained city tree, I do like the idea that it is a little more maintained, so that would be kind of cleaned up by some sort of tree trimmer, I would imagine. So this is actually the finished tree here. This is the entire piece. You can see all of the little details that we went back and forth on, the highlights on the tree, and I think, again, this is a very simple, very cheap, and effective way of making trees. Again, it's just toilet paper and some wire and a little bit of paint, a little bit of glue, flock. Nothing too crazy about it. I hope this has given you guys some ideas on what you can do with your own projects. Thanks for watching this Stoneforge Gaming video.